Leaders, what if the true enemy of your team's collaboration isn't their capability, but your own unacknowledged distrust? I'm Jordan Phillips, your dedicated advisor for overcoming team communication hurdles. And today we undertake a psychologist's deep dive into a pervasive and damaging leadership trait: ingrained distrust. We will unmask how this manifests through assuming negative intent, requiring excessive justification, and inability to build genuine rapport, examining its psychological origins and its profound, often toxic impact on team psychological safety, collaboration, and overall performance. Understanding this is vital for any leader committed to building truly high-functioning, trust-based teams. So kicking things off is assuming the negative. So let's first explore the leader who operates with a default assumption of negative intent. Ambiguous actions, neutral communications, even well-intentioned efforts from team members are often filtered through a lens of suspicion, interpreted in the worst possible light. Things like, what are they really after? Or they're probably trying to hide something, are often examples of their unspoken internal monologue. The psychological roots of such pervasive distrust can be deep and varied. Past experiences of betrayal, unresolved personal insecurities that are projected onto others, a highly cynical worldview, or even a cognitive bias that overemphasizes potential threats. The impact on a team is a chilling effect. A climate of fear and defensiveness takes hold. Team members become overly cautious, less transparent, and eventually disengage, thinking, why bother trying if my efforts will be misconstrued anyway? In a 2017 Gallup study, teams led by managers who assumed negative intent were 52% less likely to feel engaged at work and nearly twice as likely to actively seek other jobs. Distrust doesn't just damage morale, it accelerates attrition. Take Sandra, for instance, a mid-level leader at a global consultancy. After a single betrayal in her career, she began second-guessing everyone. Over 2 years, her team shrunk by half, not through firings, but through exits. They left not the company, but her. So, if you're constantly reading between the lines of every Slack message, if you can't stop thinking, what's their angle? You might be living in this mindset. Now, don't get me wrong, a bit of skepticism is healthy. Trust isn't blind faith, it's earned. But here's the difference. Sensible caution looks like clarifying expectations. Chronic distrust, that's when you start assuming guilt before evidence, blocking ideas before they're shared, and reading sabotage into silence. You can be discerning without being paranoid, but most leaders, they cross that line and then justify it. History is littered with examples of leaders whose paranoia led to catastrophic consequences. Take Stalin. His deep suspicion extended to even his closest allies. During the Great Purge, he eliminated thousands of party members on the mere possibility of disloyalty. The result was a climate of total fear where initiative, innovation, and honest dialogue were crushed. You see, when a leader consistently presumes negative intent, they are rarely demonstrating shrewd vigilance. More often, they are projecting their own inner anxieties or past wounds onto their team, forcing colleagues to navigate a treacherous landscape of unheard suspicion and work within a culture devoid of good faith. But suspicion doesn't stop at assumptions. It mutates into endless scrutiny, where your team must earn basic trust again and again and again. And that brings us on to proof over progress. So let's now consider the leader who requires excessive proof and justification for even reasonable requests or proposals. Team members find themselves jumping through hoops, providing endless documentation, and enduring relentless questioning that goes far beyond due diligence. This pattern isn't typically born from a rigorous pursuit of excellence, but rather from the leader's own deep insecurity about making the wrong decision, a fear of accountability that they try to mitigate by demanding an impossible level of certainty from others. It can also be a manifestation of a need for control, acting as a gatekeeper to maintain power, an inability to genuinely trust the competence and judgment of their team. The team experiences this as profoundly disempowering and disrespectful. Initiative is stifled as they rightfully think it's simply too much effort to get anything approved. Innovation dies a slow death by 1,000 qualifications. A more recent example is Boeing during the 737 MAX crisis. Here, engineers raised concerns, but leadership, driven by fear of delays and distrust in internal dissent, buried the warnings under process. The result of this was catastrophic, both in human cost and brand reputation. So ask yourself, do your team's best ideas get stuck, not in bad execution, but in your approval process? If so, your suspicion may be acting as the bottleneck. This is where open communication lines, vital for agility and trust, become clogged with unnecessary hurdles. And if you find your team caught in such cycles where genuine dialogue is replaced by endless justification, know that pathways to rebuilding trust exist. In the description below, you'll find a link to a free webinar that I host offering practical approaches to foster psychological safety and more open, constructive communication within your team. Making your team navigate a gauntlet of justification isn't a hallmark of thorough leadership. It's often a direct symptom of the leader's own anxieties, of their fundamental inability to extend trust. They are, in effect, outsourcing their fear onto their own team, paralyzing progress in the process. And when suspicion becomes habitual, it doesn't just distort decisions, it severs the leader from the team emotionally. And that brings us on to the final point: leadership suspicion. Pervasive distrust frequently leads to a palpable difficulty in building genuine rapport. The leader, operating from a baseline of suspicion, keeps an emotional distance. They might fear vulnerability, believing that closeness could be exploited, or that professional objectivity requires a certain aloofness. Their interactions can feel transactional, lacking warmth or authentic human communication. The psychological drivers here are often a fear of being hurt or betrayed, similar to the roots of assuming negative intent, or a learned belief that emotional containment is synonymous with strength. The team experiences a leader who is unapproachable, perhaps even cold or intimidating. Genuine loyalty struggles to take root. And what you find is team members may be committed to their work or their colleagues, but not the distant leader. Crucial feedback, both positive and negative, becomes difficult to exchange, and that collaboration lacks depth. Consider historical figures who, despite their power, were famously reclusive or guarded. They might have commanded armies or nations, but often inspired little personal devotion, relying instead on formal authority or fear because genuine human connection was absent. Contrast this with someone like Nelson Mandela, who built rapport even with former enemies by assuming dignity and humanity in others, fostering deep loyalty and transformative collaboration. So you should think, when was the last time someone on your team came to you just to talk? Not report, but to talk. If that hasn't happened in a while, you may be building walls without even knowing it. Emotional distance born from suspicion doesn't fortify a leader. It isolates them. It cuts them off from the rich tapestry of human connection, candid feedback, and collective goodwill that are the very lifeblood of insightful, resilient, and truly influential leadership. These patterns of distrust are deeply ingrained, yet not insurmountable. So, how can a leader begin to dismantle these walls? Well, overcoming a pervasive pattern of distrust is challenging, as it often requires confronting deeply held beliefs and past experiences. The journey begins with rigorous self-reflection, courageously examining the sources and triggers of one's suspicious mindset. Start by tracking specific moments where your suspicion kicks in. Write down the trigger, your immediate thought, and how you responded. This isn't just introspection, it's pattern recognition. Over time, you'll spot the cognitive loops that need rewiring, and it involves consciously practicing assuming positive or at least neutral intent until proven otherwise. A good start? Why not? In your next one-to-one, ask your team member what they meant rather than what they did wrong. And then just sit back and listen. Then afterwards, rate yourself. Did you interrupt? Did you try to fix or defend? Or did you actually listen? Give yourself a score out of 10 and ask them anonymously in a feedback form whether or not they felt heard. It requires taking small, deliberate risks in extending trust and empowering others. Then observing the outcomes without an immediate default to suspicion. While trust is a two-way street, leaders often hold a disproportionate power to set the initial tone. Choosing to build psychological safety, where team members feel safe to be open and even vulnerable, is a leadership act of profound strength. Because to conclude, distrust is slow leadership suicide. It isolates you, it drains your team, and it erodes loyalty. Start choosing trust, or start watching your influence vanish. Cool. I think we'll finish there today. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Peace.